Good afternoon, everyone. Kerasoft would like to welcome you to our Keralia webinar, Turbocharge Your Research Labs with Digital Workflows Powered by ServiceNow. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Pierre Maria, founder and CEO of Keralia. Pierre, the floor is all yours.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. And thank you to the Kerasoft team for having me here today. So I'm going to talk about how you could leverage your ServiceNow platform to transform the way researchers work in your labs. And by making their work easier, allow them to spend more time on what they do best, which is science. And I'll start with an introduction of Keralia, and then I'll move on high-level considerations on what research work looks like and why a digital transformation is much needed in this part. And then I give you an overview of newLab, our solution built on the ServiceNow platform, and how it can help you turn your labs digital. And then we'll see a quick 5-minute demo. And I'll conclude with some ideas on why you should be interested and some suggestions on what you could do next if you're interested in discovering more. And hopefully, as Kirsten said, I'll have some time at the end to take a few questions. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so you should be able to see my slides now. Is that okay for everyone?
Yep, yeah? Looks good to me.
Okay. Let's start by who we are. So I created this company 7 years ago, and we started as ServiceNow implementation partner mostly. And in 2017, we decided to become a technology partner, which means that we decided to build our own software on the ServiceNow platform. And after some research, we decided to focus on creating a cloud platform for research because we saw there, and I'll explain that later on, an opportunity, but we also saw their mission. So we're a team dedicated to doing just this, and we started the commercialization of this solution last year. And in the US, as Kirsten said, with an agreement with Kerasoft for the public sector. And for doing so, we have assembled a team which is mixing technical expertise, software architects, developers, etc., and people with a scientific backgrounds, most of them having a PhD, who come from the research. So I think that we understand the challenges, we understand the needs and the culture, because some of our people, and as a team, speak the same language. And I would say, like probably almost any startup in the market, we really work on agile mode, very customer driven. We've built up this solution from the inputs of our pilot customers, and obviously we have a roadmap, but we're still very reactive to customer needs. Let's get back to the core focus. So here is a very high level view of what research is all about. So it's all about people having ideas and then trying to test and prove those ideas by means of experiments, which in turn produce data that is summarized into results that confirm or deny the initial ideas. And this cycle goes over again and again. And depending on what field in research you're in, this work mostly takes place in labs. So by the way, we're talking here about scientific fields like, for instance, biology or chemistry or medical science, materials, etc. The so-called hard sciences, and not really about social sciences, which have the same kind of cycle, but don't really rely on labs to do so. So basically, if you look at the lab's activity, its main activities is organized around experiments. And if we look at what does an experiment look like, well, it looks like a workflow. So here I've taken an example of a typical experimental workflow in life sciences. So you have some planning and design activities to start with. Then you will prepare samples, for instance, cells or tissue in the case of biology. Then you would submit those samples for analysis. This will get you raw data that you need to process, analyze in order to get to some interesting results that would be stored, reused, and the cycle goes over again. And this workflow really cuts across the whole lab infrastructure. First of all, instruments, scientific instruments, like if we stay on biology, microscope or cytometers, spectrometers, well, you name it, all kind of sensors and so on. This cuts also across systems that are needed essentially to process and analyze and visualize, interpret the raw data in order to get to results. And finally, and especially in the last few years, it's very likely that the data will be stored into some kind of data lake to be later reused by data scientists that will complement the bench scientists who are really performing the experiments. So there's a lot of data-driven research too. So this is a typical workflow. And if now we look at how those workflows are really implemented in most labs today, this is the situation we find. We have disconnected steps, a lot of manual handover from one step to the next one, with fragmented applications and data silos. There are still a lot of paperwork, like for instance, observations on a particular step, which are not recorded electronically in a system, but on paper or notebooks. And as we all know, paper get lost sometime. And this may prove absolutely key then to interpret data and validate the results. So I think this situation of fragmented application silos and manual processes has a huge impact on the productivity of scientists. If I take an example, for instance, of a conversation I had recently with a lab manager from a big research institution on the East Coast. In their lab, the way they work is that they get their data directly from the instruments they use on USB drives. Then they would copy-paste this raw data into Excel spreadsheets to do some analysis and have results under the form of graphics, for instance. And then they would again copy-paste those results into Word reports, and that would be sent to the actual requester or the initial analysis. So this is not an isolated case, although it might seem a bit extreme. Some studies show that scientists may spend up to 40% of the time just wrangling with data, moving data from one system to another. And this is not only a waste of time, which is enough of a problem, especially if you consider that most of these people are holding PhDs, but it's also error prone, and it's potentially leading to wrong results. And I think it's not just me saying so. I think there's a lot of consensus of this idea that the lab of the future, as it is often called, should not look like the lab of today, and should be should make life a little bit easier for scientists. And why is that? I think it's because we all badly need faster innovation, and that means more efficient and faster research in the first place. So I picked here the climate example and the dramatic events we had this summer, the fires here, the flooding also in Europe. But I could have taken another example like the COVID situation. We are only started to get out. And I think there are two conditions for faster innovation. And don't get me wrong here, I'm not saying that those two conditions will solve the climate problem, for instance, but they are just enablers. I think one is more cooperation between multidisciplinary team, between public research and private research, like we saw a perfect example in the case of the COVID vaccine. And the second one is clearly more integration to make those workflows really more integrated and move faster from ideas to results, move faster this research life cycle. So now that said, how do we get more integration? So in my view, the answer is by implementing a platform to connect the dots between all those fragmented applications and data silos. And this is what we are aiming at with newLab. So that means that this platform could replace some of the legacy systems. She could certainly replace a lot of the paperwork that is still taking place in the labs, and it will connect the research teams with their work, their experiments, their resources, the data they are using and producing anytime, anywhere. And that platform would also bring an easy way to create workflows and to connect those workflows to the infrastructure and the system that we've seen earlier on, because it's clearly not intended to replace everything. I don't believe, and I think the market doesn't believe anymore in a vertical a solution that would really address all needs. I think that one of the reasons also of the situation that I described of fragmented and incompatible silos is also that in the past years, software vendors have locked their customers into proprietary and closed solution. And I think that those days are over, and customers want integration, they want open standards. And a platform should be capable to integrate and connect all of the research ecosystem, and especially in terms of data management and data interpretation. It's sometimes very, very specific and very sophisticated tool, and you cannot really embark everything on what platform. So this is what newLab aims to do. And if we can just have a look at one workflow, again, I've picked an example from life sciences here, as it could be run by newLab. For instance, you would have, and I'll show you in the demo a part of this. You have to start with finding a protocol to design an experiment. So for that, you will be using the newLab's knowledge base. Once you settled on your protocol, you can then automatically open it in an electronic notebook and start designing and adapting it to design your experimental workflow. Then you will be able, because resources are linked into the same platform, to automatically book what you need to actually run the experiment, like in this particular case, a sequencer and the reagents that come together, the sequencer. Then you would still need to run the experiment, which means being at the lab and looking at the results, but newLab will get automatically the data from the sequencer, so you can capture the results. You can then connect into an analysis application to really do the interpretation and analysis and build up your report. Then the system would automatically update inventory, which is very important in a lab, because when the inventory is manually managed through Excel spreadsheet, for instance, and not updated, that can block an experiment from actually being run. And if you block an experiment, when you're sometimes working with samples that have a limited lifespan, that means losing your sample, and sometimes that means a cost of several $1,000s. So it's extremely important to rely on up-to-date inventories. And then, as I said, well, the results will be stored for reuse later on. So that flow of steps, some of the data is generated and stored by newLab, by the platform. Some of it comes from the ecosystem and is connected and is referenced, and you can always get back to an experiment that you performed 6 months ago and maintain this traceability and easily get back to the raw data that is supporting your results and so on. So that's the benefit of having a workflow and a digitized workflow, and having all those steps connected by the workflow instead of letting manual. So here I just want to, prior to the demo, show you a bit of the product structure. So we have on the, and how we're using the ServiceNow platform. So it's a built on Now application, which means that it's been certified by ServiceNow and it sells on ServiceNow store. And we currently have 3 modules that you see here. I'll come back later on each of these modules: newLab Portal, Notebook, and Resource Manager. All 3 modules are sharing the same data model and the same technology components. So it's not 3 different applications, it's 3 modules on one single platform. And I think it's something which is rather unique on the market, to have this portal which is more dedicated to resource and services, and Notebook, which is more dedicated to recording experiments on the same platform. And the components that we are leveraging essentially on the ServiceNow platform, and which also make newLab different from the competition, are the service portal, which is one single place where scientists can find anything they need to run their projects and experiments, including the knowledge base, which is the second thing which is quite different, and you'll see that on the demo. The workflow design and automation, which also is enabling people to very easily design their own custom workflow, which makes the thing really easy to deploy. The CMDB, which for those of you who are not familiar with that term, stands for Configuration Management Database. And it's a way of having all your instruments and all of your resources consolidated on one single platform, which very often leads to quick wins, like creating efficiencies, like optimizing equipment usage, cutting down on product wastage that you have when things are really not consolidated and spread on Excel files all over. And lastly, Integration Hub, which is the features for integrating with the ecosystem of research and more generally the enterprise ecosystem. So here we heavily rely on the connectors which are provided by ServiceNow. And we are also adding value by providing connectors which are more specific to the research ecosystem. So very quickly, sorry about that. Very quickly on the free module, what we call newLab portal is dedicated to managing central services, core facilities, and in general shared infrastructures by providing one single point where people can find what they need, and also a reservation engine, and also request management workflows like billing, for instance, if those core facilities are on the recharge model for their services. A notebook is where you can edit, design experiments, schedule them, and work collaboratively around experiments with automated workflows. And both of those modules include resource management, but we felt the need to make resource management a separate module as well for customers who would like to start just with inventory management or instrument management, which, as I said, can be quick wins and really create efficiencies. So I think now is the time for demos. So I'm going to switch. So it's a recorded demo. It's not a live demo. So I'm going to switch my screen to the video thing. Okay, can you still see my screen?
Yeah, but it's not full screen.
Yeah, okay. So here you see an example of the landing page for a newLab portal. So obviously this is entirely customizable so that it can look and feel like your other websites. So I'm going to, for that demo, I'm going to connect as Shirley, who is a biologist. And we're going to, so she comes into the portal so she can see a catalog. She has access to the knowledge page. There's also a live feed that we're not going to see. So she's looking things so she can search the entire application. Here, as she's looking for a protocol, she's going to filter the data to just add the knowledge base, and in the knowledge base, the protocols. So everything here is also customizable. So she finds a protocol about confocal microscopy, and here she can interact with the person who wrote this protocol in the first place. She can rate it. So those are usual functionalities. And once she's good with the protocol, she can open it directly from the knowledge base into a notebook. So here she has the protocol with the various steps ready for an experiment. She can also edit it if needed. So she's then going to create an experiment from this protocol. So here we are. And here she's got all the steps and she can start designing her experiments. She can, for instance, here change the quantities she need or this type of consumable. She can also check for resources. So she has several calendar views of resources. So here, for instance, she's going to look for an available technician to assign some of the protocol experiment steps. So that's she is scheduling with a start date and an end date. And it will be assigned to one of the technician who was available, Jessie in that case. So she can assign the whole experiment on only steps. And once she's done that, then here we see, I'm going to stop a little bit maybe here, but here we see a personal workspace, which is entirely customizable. So each user can have what they want to see on their workspace. So here she's going into the essay she's just assigned, and we see that all the actions are stored in the application, which makes an audit trail. And this is very important in particular for reproduce experiments and ensuring a full traceability. So if we move on with the scheduled demo, she's got a table view here of everything which will be used in terms of product in this particular experiment. And she can also have a look from her workspace. She can look into the inventory, and here we see a few dashboards that can also be customized. So in this example, she's going to check product from this particular Sigma manufacturer. And you can then navigate into the inventory. This shows you real-time inventory, which is updated by all the experiments taking place at the moment. You can export those reports if you want, for instance. And here now we're going to connect as Jessie. So he's been notified of the experiment he has to do. So here, for instance, if I'm just stopping here, is going to consume one raw material for the experiment. So we are emulating the fact that is reading a barcode number, but for doing so, Jessie is really on the bench in the lab, actually consuming products. So once he has done that, the inventory will be automatically updated. And he can close this step and can also close a number of steps in one go. So it's not forced to close everything step by step. So here, this is what he's doing, closing all the steps. And finally, we'll see one observation step when everything is ready. So I'm going to stop a little bit here again. Is going to start actually the observation on a microscope in that particular case. And well, obviously this is a demo, so it is very quick, but once the image from the microscope is ready, newLab is able to get that image and to attach it to the experiment for further analysis. And you can here add comment if you want, or notes on the image, or you can share those details at each step of the experiment with Shirley and all the other people that work on the same experiment. And here what you see is that at the end, we have an option to provide a report. So this is what is done, is provided a report, which is obviously entirely configurable. And that's the end of the experiment piece. And in the last few seconds of this demo, I'd like to show you an example of using the portal for booking an instrument. So it's a very simple reservation. So again, those catalogs that you can display on the portal are entirely configurable. Here we have demo systems with a few services and instruments, but you can have services, you can have instruments, you can organize the category here, the category that you see here, according, for instance, to your core facilities, or by instruments as it is here. So this is, and you have again a search engine that enables you to search through the entire catalog. So this is what we do here. And when Shirley has found what she needed, a cytometer, she can book it in a couple of clicks. So she's going to pick available times. So here the calendar shows only available times in green. So she's going to pick 4 times here. She has also the option to add special instructions if needed. And she confirms the booking and she's done. Okay, so that is for the demo. So if I switch back to my presentation now to conclude. Okay, so I'd like to wrap this up with 3 reasons why I think you should be interested by newLab. Well, the first one is probably the easiest way to bring the power of ServiceNow into your labs. And by doing so, enabling your research digitization while leveraging at the same time the skills and past investment that you already made on the ServiceNow platform. The second thing is it's really a foundation for that integrated research platform I made the case for at the beginning of my presentation, connecting teams with their work, their experiments, their resources, the data, their knowledge, anytime, anywhere. And I think that it's really something which is very important for productivity, as we said. And I don't think that you can really buy an integrated platform and have it delivered to you in one go. You have to build it one step at a time, because I believe it's really a transformation. It requires some change management. And I really think that newLab brings to the table a few interesting characteristics to make this transformation easier, and they are really, in my opinion, essential to that. One, it's easy to use and to implement. You can, for instance, empower users by leveraging the workflow designing capabilities, and they can create their own custom workflows without any particular IT skills, which I think is a big advantage for adapting to such an evolving environment as a modern lab is. Second thing, it's scalable. We're cloud-based with a subscription model, which allow you to start small with one lab and a few users, and to grow as you fine tune the concept along the journey. And lastly, and I think it's really essential, as I said, it's open. We have this integration hub capabilities with standard connectors that connect you to the most known applications that you may have, like for instance, Teams, if you want to build a better and even seamless collaborative experience for people, extending workflows even outside of research. And as I said, we at Keralia, we are adding over time connectors specifically for connecting, for instance, to the research ecosystem, connecting to instruments, or connecting to other lab management systems or data management platforms that are needed in the research ecosystems. And lastly, if you're really interested and if you would like to discover more, I would like to offer, again, 3 ideas. One is to ask for a live demo, and we would you can reach out to your Carsoft contact, and we would set up this time a live demo, like a 30-minute or 40-minute, whatever time, depending on your question, with one of our solution consultants, and you can go further and get really a deep dive on the product. If you want to go more, we would set up for you a free trial instance, kind of a sandbox where you can take some time to really play with the solution and explore it a little further. And as one says, seeing is believing. So if you really want to see it live, we can also do what we call a proof of concept by configuring one of your actual workflows with some sample data, and by letting actual users using it for a few weeks so that you can really see how they feel about it, and if it's helpful or not. And with that, I think I'm finished with the presentation. So I don't know, Kirsten, if there are some questions in the chat. I'll be happy to take a few questions if there are some.
Yeah, thank you, Pierre. It looks like the first question that we have coming in says, can you speak about implementation and how long does it take to implement this in a typical lab?
So yeah, it's a good question. I didn't touch the implementation part. But as I said, we are suggesting an agile approach, and that's the first thing. For a typical lab, although each lab is different, but I would say that for a typical lab, we're talking in terms of duration, we're talking of a few weeks. We're not talking about months of implementation. It's rather, as I said, easy to implement. So typically, getting a lab live to production would take between, I would say, 5, 6 weeks, 8 weeks maximum. Maybe with not with 100% of the features, but at least enough to start working. And as I said, improving the system fine-tuning over time. And what I can also say about that is that if you have existing ServiceNow skills, from a technical point of view, newLab is a ServiceNow application, so we're using the ServiceNow technical object. Like for instance, an experiment is a series of tasks. So if you have people who have a good knowledge of ServiceNow, the learning curve to have them administering and configuring newLab is not very long. It's really straightforward. And obviously, we are offering consulting services to help you along the way. As I said, at Keralia, we started with services at the beginning, and we also have implementation partners who may help you along the way through Kerasoft as well. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
Thank you, Pierre. And it looks like the last question that we have coming in says, can you be more specific on the pricing model?
Yes, so, well, this one is an easy one. As I've shown, we have 3 modules, and so you can buy modules separately or together. And if you buy them together, as I said, they are all part of the same platform, sharing the same database. So it's really plug and play. And in terms of pricing models, so it's user-based, it's a subscription, so it's a monthly price. And we have 2 categories of users. One that we call full user. So full user, as the name implies, they have access to all the features of the module for which they are subscribed. From a licensing point of view, obviously you can restrict what they can do or see within the application by configuring their user profile, but from a licensing point of view, they can do everything in the module. And then we have what we call the requester model. So it's very similar for those of you who are familiar with ServiceNow pricing models to the fulfiller requester model. So requesters can only put up requests on the portal. Like, for instance, they can book instruments, and they can track and see the status of their request. But they can also access the knowledge base on the portal looking for a protocol. But contrary to what we saw in the demo, they would just get a protocol. They can't import that protocol into their notebook because they don't have access to the notebook. They can just request services. This is particularly adapted for core facilities. For instance, in universities, they have core facilities which are providing services to a community of students and postdocs and researchers. And typical core facilities would have 5 to 10 staff members, and those staff members would have full user rights for the newLab portal module. And the community of users, which may be hundreds or even sometimes thousands of users, they would only require a requester use rights. And there is a big difference in terms of price, obviously, between the requester and full users.
Thanks, Pierre. And it looks like that was our last question.
Okay. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And as Kirsten said, feel free to reach out to your Kerasoft contacts if you want to go further, and we'll be happy to be in touch. And with that, have a good day, everyone.